What's going on, everybody? It's Wednesday night, which means you are officially welcomed inside the Browns beat here on the OBR streaming network. The OBR, the Orange and Brown Report, is the oldest and largest independent Browns coverage site in all of Cleveland. So follow that QR code in the corner, get over to the OBR.com, hit subscribe, and not only can you hang out with us on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, but then you can get over to the OBR.com and be a part of not just some of the best Cleveland Browns coverage that you're going to find out there from my colleague and my co-host and my other colleagues from the OBR, but you can also be a part of the best Cleveland Browns community online. It's all at the OBR.com, so make sure you get over at that QR code and make sure you get subscribed. Tonight, joining you as always, I'm your host, Michael Keefe, joining me here inside the Browns beat on this chilly, cold, frigid last Wednesday of January, if you can believe that. It's Fred Greetham. Fred, nothing going on today, right?
It's been a long day. It's been on show after show, radio, TV. You know, it's like nobody wants you till they all want you at once, you know. But I'm at the most important hit of the college life right here.
That's what I'm talking about.
You know, I thought it would happen today. I actually thought it would happen yesterday.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, they're going to sleep on it tonight, and it'll be this morning. Was not expecting when I saw Adam Schefter's tweet. I looked at it, rechecked all the little letters to see if it was the Adam Schefter.
Are we sure it's not Adam Schefter?
And I saw he had 12 million viewers. I go, okay, that's legit, believe it or not. I know that Lane and others had said that Monken was still in the picture, but I kind of didn't think he was in the picture. You know, sometimes when you're anticipating news, you write what we call a shell where you get it ready ahead of time. I had one for Schwartz for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I did Shieldhouse and had his ready. I just put together one last night for Monken, to be honest, but Schwartz was way longer, you know, went into a lot more detail, which will never be printed. But yeah, it does surprise me because you look at the strength of the Browns is the defense. We all know they need to get the offense fixed, but I feel like you're taking a chance on making the defense step back. Yeah, you still got players. You might have some disgruntled players right now, but the way Jim Schwartz, at least from national reporters, communicated is that it wasn't like they had talked about this ahead of time. I had to believe, even if yesterday was nothing about spending the day trying to get this out. And this is no disrespect to Todd Monken. I kind of like him, but I was thinking you were going to have Monken and Schwartz somehow. But obviously Monken didn't want to be the head coach or offensive coordinator. He was going with Harbaugh to the Giants.
Yep.
And they just felt like, obviously, we haven't talked to anybody. They haven't had a press conference. But they obviously felt in the end that it was worth the risk to try to get the offense fixed, even if you got your defensive coordinator all up in knots and ready to leave. And I have to take him serious. He's going to get offers and he'll probably leave. So with that said, they better be right, or it's going to be the strength of the team takes a step back and you hope the offense can get going. I don't know if they can make a monumental leap or not in one off season.
Well, listen, there's so much to unpack, and we'll get to the news and we'll get to all that. And again, we have a little bit of a format change. This is kind of our tester episode, but this is how we're going to roll into the offseason for a lot of shows. So if you're watching us live or you're watching us later, we want you to get on board with this because we really want to make this a more interactive show. In just a couple of minutes, we had some viewer-submitted video questions that we're going to get to, and so it's kind of what I hinted at last week, but this week we're going to go for it. We also do have a guest, though. It's a last-minute thing, literally about 10 minutes ago. We got a response, and this was our buddy Pete Smith hooking us up with our special guest tonight, suggested that we have him on. So we're going to bring in Ken McKusick. He works for the Ravens film study show over there in Baltimore. and we're going to talk to him. And we're going to have to be nice. You're going to have to let a Baltimore guy come in here and talk about it. But obviously, he does a lot of film studies, so he's going to be able to really break down, what kind of philosophies and things we can look for from Monken and a lot of the questions that people have, because it's going to be a lot of new players, and he's not bringing Lamar Jackson with him. And so there's going to be a lot of those questions that I think Ken's going to be great. So at 7:30, we're going to bring Ken on. In just a few minutes, we're going to start our video submitted questions. But again, if you're watching us live tonight, we know you can question. We know our comments are lively. So just kind of before, I'm going to start posting things on like Sundays before the show starts. When you got questions about things, put it in a little video of yourself, just a little selfie video, 10, 30 seconds, somewhere in that range, and just send them in, and you'll be a part of next week's show. So we're excited to get to that. But Fred, okay, so the news hits. It's Todd Monken. I think it would be false to say that it was anybody's first choice when it comes to just the temperature in the room for the Cleveland Browns. But I also think a lot of the temperature in the room was a little bit off kilter because we had a lot of people that were suddenly experts on these guys they hadn't heard about 3 days earlier. So here's what I'm going to ask you, Fred. Todd Monken's coming back. We had a sniff. We had a cup of tea, if you will, with Todd Monken in 2019. You'll remember Baker Mayfield's second year. The Freddie Kitchens year did not go great as Baker was still kind of developing. It wasn't nearly as fun as that 2018 year, and it felt like there was a little bit of a step back. But Todd Monken left. He went to Georgia, won a couple national championships with the Georgia Bulldogs as their offensive coordinator. And then obviously the last 3 years went to Baltimore, and we know what he's done with that offense and turning Lamar Jackson into an MVP and all that. So, Fred, just kind of go back 2019. Is there anything memorable for you about Todd Monken and his kind of first stint here?
I remember every Thursday, in the coordinators, he would speak to us, and I know later he kind of talked about it. His weekly dentist sessions with the media. And in looking at, if you remember, Freddie Kitchens called the plays. So Monken had to get up every Thursday and talk, but he really didn't have the full reins, kind of like Tommy Reese before he was calling the plays, where you couldn't really get into some of the ins and outs on what exactly your idea or your plan was, with certain situations. So he was up there defending what they were doing when sometimes he didn't make the decisions, that Freddie Kitchens did. So he didn't have great things to say after he left Cleveland, I know. But when he was here, like I said, he was bright, articulate, but wasn't a lot of substance I remember from those times. Most coaches there isn't, but sometimes when you're the guy in the big chair, you're different than when you're the guy, under somebody. I always said this about Schwartz. I think he's a disciplinarian and will hold players accountable. And I've heard the same thing about Monken. They might be viewed differently when they're in a subservient role underneath a head coach. So we'll see. But that's what I remember, is that Odell Beckham had the best year of the last year that he went over 1,000. He was dealing with Beckham and Landry, and he had Nick Chubb he was the runner-up in the rushing. I think that was to Derrick Henry that year, who rushed like crazy in the last game to win it. And Baker Mayfield had the best year, I think, that he had with the Browns until maybe the next year. But he really had a good year that year. So he's been very successful. He's kind of like the opposite. He's the offensive Jim Schwartz, same age. Schwartz got one opportunity to be a head coach beside the Browns, and Monken has never had that chance. He's only been a head coach with Southern Mississippi for 3 years.
Right.
But he's been successful, but he's never got a head coaching job. So, I mean, I think he's 37 years. He's got a lot of connections. We'll see what kind of staff he puts together, but that's what I remember is that he had a pretty good offense when they were here.
Yeah,
The
and he's
defense was bad.
He's always had a good offense, and we're going to get into some of these questions here in a minute, and I know some of them are going to feature Jim Schwartz questions, but that was it. And you said it before, but I also want to give credit because friend of the show, first of all, Lane Atkins, obviously with us here at the OBR, has been saying it. If you're a member of the OBR.com, you will have seen it. But also want to give credit. I think it was a couple days ago, 2-3 days ago, Mary Kay Cabot. I know everybody got caught up in Jim Schwartz or Nate Shieldhouse or Udinsky before he left, but it was a few days ago that Mary Kay Cabot tweeted, I'm hearing you should maybe pay a little bit of attention to the fact that Todd Monken is still in this race. He's still very much alive in it. And now here we are. Did you get any feeling, Fred, as the day went on, as just kind of, I think things kind of exploded because of all the narratives around this search and Jimmy Haslam. Everybody wants there to be this. So I'm going to ask you a pointed question about this relationship-wise. From what you know, it feels to me like a lot of fans and really a lot of media people are desperate for there to be this rift that they can talk about between Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry. And everybody wants to say this is Jimmy's thing, and he stepped over Andrew. And I saw so many people today. Andrew Berry has no power. He's a puppet with the Browns, blah, blah, blah. Do you have any indication that this was anything other than those two guys and whoever else was involved coming together and making this decision to bring in Todd Monken?
No, I think he had every opportunity to fire him 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he decided that it was better to have him than, to go into a coach GM search with nobody than to have somebody like Berry. I mean, I think I've said it before. I think both of them should have stayed or both of them should have gone. They were together, but they decided to break it up and put the blame on Stefanski and let Berry, based on his draft last year, keep his job, assuming that wasn't luck, that he's going to do the same thing again this year in the draft. Well, that would be great if he's grown to the point where now he's really nailing it. But no, I don't think that. I think the rift might have been they thought, okay, we can still have our cake and eat it too. We got Schwartz. We said how much we want him. We absolutely want him. I mean, I looked at the quotes today. Again, when they fired Stefanski, they didn't say anything negative. Everything was, we want Jim Schwartz. Absolutely. He's a great coach. But it's like they wanted him to stay as the defensive coordinator, but we got to get an offensive guy. They knew Monken wouldn't take the job as the offensive coordinator, and that leaves Shieldhouse. And they probably came to the conclusion, like Joe Thomas put out, is that you don't want a guy that's never done this before because it's not just coaching, it's running the whole thing. So that's all I can figure. But I'm still totally surprised that the reaction that Schwartz had wasn't seemed to be known by the Browns. That they had to know that he was wanting out. And
do you think that's the fault maybe of just the narratives of what got out? Because it really felt like all we heard about was, well, the Browns are adamant that they have to keep Jim Schwartz, and if you're going to come coach here, you have to make sure you're going to keep Jim Schwartz and Jim Schwartz this. And I said it on this show, Fred. I said, well, if you're that adamant about Jim Schwartz, then he needs to be the head coach. Like that's the answer, because it sounded to me today that, and we knew this, Jim Schwartz was non-committal. We knew this before today. He was non-committal. If he doesn't get the head coach, he's not going to commit to staying here. The Browns knew that. We knew that. And so I guess I'm just not, a lot of people acted surprised by what happened. And I think, was it maybe overblown, Fred, from your understanding? Was it maybe overblown? Like this, they're demanding Jim Schwartz must stay. And clearly they didn't have that big of a demand, or else they would have made sure he was on board with it before they hired a coach and watched Jim Schwartz stomp his feet out the door.
Yeah, well, that's if it's he's under contract. I remember a guy named Kyle Shanahan who was under contract and put out a 32-point PowerPoint in order to leave. If, the PR and around the league doesn't go well if you hold a guy to somebody if he doesn't want to be here, and so with that said, they had to make that decision knowing there was a very high chance that he would not want to stay under another coach when he was sitting here in a prime opportunity to take over when the players and the key players all campaigned for him. So, like I said, it's calculated risk. It could backfire greatly,
or it could be great.
Maybe it would come down. One way I was presented that they would be together, like like two head coach, one running the defense, one running the offense. But that obviously wasn't the way it was sold.
Well, I feel like, Fred, it's like the same quote as you get for quarterbacks. If you have two good quarterbacks, it means you don't have one. If you have two head coaches, you don't have one. What are we doing with two head coaches? Fred, just because I want to make sure we have enough time for this, I want to get to our viewer submitted questions. So again, we're going to start doing this every week on Inside the Browns Beat. And so again, get over to our Twitter page at Browns Beat OBR, on Twitter at Browns Beat OBR, or you can just email us at insidethebrownsbeat@gmail.com. And you could send us your user submitted videos, but we've got a few of them to get to. And I know maybe some of it will be some of the stuff we've talked about, but let's start with the first one. This is going to be from Dan. So let's get to Dan's video here.
Hey guys, got a two-parter here. With the news of Todd Monken being the coach of the Browns, what is your take on allegedly having a process of only bringing in a coach that will keep Jim Schwartz around? And two, with him still under contract, do you think he's pulling a Kyle Shanahan and drafting a 30-page PowerPoint to find his way out of Cleveland? Appreciate it.
All right, so I figured we'd start with that one because I know we were just kind of talking about that. But listen, let me know your thoughts on this, Fred. We just talked about the Schwartz thing, and it was that overblown on whether they were being so demanding on Jim Schwartz or not, which, again, clearly that wasn't the case. But on the other side of things, Jim Schwartz, it was a reputation that he built up when he was a head coach in Detroit. He was reactionary. You'll remember some of his famous kind of tantrums that he had in Detroit, and man, he almost got into a fight going off the field after a game. And he is a reactionary dude. It has been part of his nature. It's part of what we know about him. And so when you read and when you saw his reaction today, that when he found out he didn't get the job, he went around and told coaches goodbye, and he kind of just stormed out of the building. It wasn't all that surprising to me. Having said that, I think it leaves a question lingering because so much has been made of Jim Schwartz staying on with the Cleveland Browns, Fred, do you think that maybe Jim Schwartz is the kind of guy that has a big reaction like that, but then 2 days later, Todd Monken can have a conversation with him and they can have a conversation about how they move forward?
Well, I think that there is a possibility. Yeah, I think that's one of the first tasks, Todd Monken, you're trying to put together your staff. And before every other, assistant, that you had in mind gets, hired, you want to know where the top of the food chain, because if you've noticed, Stefanski took some guys with him on offense, but not any defensive players, because I think they were all anticipating staying kind of intact. The only one I knew on defense was Ephraim Banda, the safeties coach, interviewed for the defensive coordinator with the Cowboys and the Jets. Now, I was told that if Schwartz was the head coach, that he would promote from within. Now, I don't know if it would have been Banda or like a Tarver, the linebacker coach, but it would make sense. So I don't know what's going to happen. I do think, that when things cool down, he might get blown away with a great offer somewhere else as a defensive coordinator. But if you got a big pay raise, I don't know if that even matters. Or you got knowing that it's a customized defense that you have with the Browns.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know the Browns need a ton of offense. And what did Schwartz lobby and got the top 2 picks last year?
Right.
Graham and Schlesinger to his side of the ball. So that side of the ball is kind of custom fit, so there's no guarantee you're going to go to another team and have a great defense again.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Again, mending that relationship. We'll see if the Browns want to do it, and we'll see if Todd Monken wants to do it. There's a lot of assumptions being made out there about how conversations have gone and how things will go, because we don't even know. We don't know. They might look at that reaction that Jim Schwartz had and say, a lot of people can make a lot of jokes about how maybe the head coaching job of the Cleveland Browns isn't the most attractive thing, but I'll tell you what. If for some reason they don't bring Jim Schwartz back because that relationship is beyond repair, I don't think, Fred, you can let me know if you disagree. I don't think it'll be real hard to find a defensive coach and a really good defensive coach to come in and coach this defense.
No, I don't. I mean, I'm sure it'll be somebody in Monken's pathway, I know he coached, I think, with Wink Martindale. Some of these, already he's bringing in George Warhope, who was here with the Browns. He's like 60-something coach. So you'll get these guys that have been around a long time, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing either. But he's got a much bigger network than a Shieldhouse or somebody there. But as far as, I don't know, I know Schwartz run a certain style, and you traded Greg Newsome with Tyson Campbell because he was a man-to-man press guy and not a zone guy. And I know the coaches are smart enough to know those things, but you really can't get somebody that says, look, I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm going to run my own defense with these guys and we'll make it work. Okay. I just am not of the opinion that you can say, okay, we're going to a 3-4 and we're going to change the whole defense, but we got these players, we'll make them work, because I've seen that before. And so that's where I'm saying they're on a fine line on the defense. You got an elite defense, at least good enough to win the division with and go in the playoffs. Yeah. Why do you have to blow it up? But yes, it's very attractive, but you got to get somebody that's willing to put their ego aside and run the same type of thing. And maybe even that's where a Banda or a Tarver could just get promoted and say, look, we're keeping it the same.
Yeah, I think internal candidates are going to be very appealing on the defensive side for the Browns. All right, next user submitted video question. This one comes from Harry.
Guys, my question is around Todd Monken. He's been around a long time, and, he's done a lot with the Ravens offense. I'm just wondering, given his age, he's 59 right now. We didn't go after Udinski or Shield Chase or Shieldhouse, whatever you say his name. With those younger minds, is Monken really just a stopgap until we revamp the offense and then we're going to reevaluate the head coach position later? Or is this like a long-term thing? Because I just don't really see it being a long-term solution.
Well,
I saw that a lot online today. I saw that a lot.
It's a good question, but we don't, we could be in the same position next year. That's one of the reasons I said, if you're going to fire Stefanski, fire Barry and start over, because you could have kept Stefanski, go another year and then fire them both. You'd probably be 2-15 and got the number one pick. Then you have an appealing thing. You're bringing in whoever it is, Arch Manning or whoever the flavor of the day, the guy that comes out of the blue, like Francisco Mendoza, whatever. But, now they're expecting him to work with what they have. We have no idea if he said, I like Shedeur Sanders. I think we can make him into a great quarterback, a legitimate Pro Bowl quarterback, by the way. Maybe he said, heaven forbid, I think I can make Deshaun Watson a player.
Stop it.
Who knows?
Knock it off,
We haven't
Fred.
talked to anybody. It's all speculation.
Can we just have 1 week of this show without that name coming up? One week.
What if you hear it steady? What if that was something that appealed to him? I don't know. We don't know really. It's all speculation, but it's a great point. I take offense on the age because I'm older than Schwartz and Monken. But he does have 37 years experience, and that's where I think it's valued more. Same thing Joe Thomas, if you saw a video he put out, is that you want people that have a network to put together the staff. It's not the head coach who coaches, it's all the assistants. And I thought Kevin Stefanski had a really good staff. I was surprised the names when he first came for the first time. You're like, you're getting Bill Callahan, you're getting all these want to work for you. Even Schwartz came in and after Joe Woods. And so, yeah, it's going to have to play out. He's never had a chance before, so I'm sure he's going to try to make the most of it. And if it doesn't work, you'll be right back in the same place. But it's clear they want to fix the offense, and they're willing to mess with the defense if they can get up to the numbers that his offenses have put up. But as you said earlier, he's not bringing Lamar Jackson, and he's not bringing Derrick Henry that we know of.
Right. All right. We got 3 more of these that I want to get through before we get to our special guest again, Ken McKusick from Film Study Ravens, going to talk about really breaking down Todd Monken and philosophy and style and all that. But next user video submitted comes from Lauren. So let's put this up.
Hey guys, big fan of the show. Couple questions for you. Is Monken going to call the plays? And what do you think his plan's going to be to fix the offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume he's going to call the plays. That's what he's best at. That's what he was brought in for. Stefanski did when he came, but he's given it up now. So I think Monken will definitely call the plays. I don't know who the offensive coordinator would be under him. So that would be the first, but we have not. That's one of the questions that will be in the first press conference. The other thing would be as far as the second part of that question.
Just like, what do you think they're going to do to build up the offensive line? Because I think, obviously that's important to him. Todd Monken likes to run the ball. I think if you look at his numbers and the EPA per run and all that stuff, it's going to be skewed because he was in Baltimore. And again, you're not going to have Lamar Jackson. So the running numbers get skewed in Baltimore a bit, but I think it says something that his first thing he did was bring George Warhop with him, the offensive line coach. I think the offensive line is very important to him. And obviously, with all the issues the Browns have had on the offensive line, to me, bringing in Todd Monken, he's going to want to run the ball. And the type of offense that he has run is going to require an offensive line that gives a little bit of time to the quarterback. So you got to think priority number 1 is that offensive line, right, Fred?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to mention. Warhop, first hire he's made, first move within an hour after it's announced is he's bringing offensive line coach Warhop, who's done nothing but be an offensive line coach in like his entire career. And he was with the Browns 2009 to I think the 13th. So yeah, we'll see. But as far as maybe he can bring the Pro Bowl center, Linderbaum, that's a free agent center, we'll see what kind of connection he has there. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's a priority. They were number 1 in the NFL in rushing. And so I think that's what he wants to do.
All right. Next one. Let's see here. This one comes from Derek.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my question. Obviously, big news today out of Cleveland with the new coach being announced as Todd Monken. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Out of this past rookie class, who do you think he's going to have the biggest impact on? And then for the upcoming draft class, where do you think is going to be his biggest area of focus? Offensive line, receiver, maybe a quarterback to bring in some more competition? Can't wait to hear you guys' thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what he thinks of Shedeur Sanders. We know the Ravens were linked to going to draft Sanders in about the 5th round. That's what Sanders said, that he didn't want to be the backup to Lamar for 10 years. So we don't know if that was Monken saying, hey, why don't we take this guy? Don't know what he thinks about Dylan Gabriel or Deshaun Watson. I'll mention it again. But I think everybody knows what the Browns need. They need an offensive line, especially if Joe Bitonio retires. You would need 4 starting offensive linemen. And if you can't depend on DeJuan Jones, so you really could be looking at 5 starting offensive linemen. And so I think you got 2 first-round picks. I'm not inclined to think they're going to go for a quarterback or try to go for it in this draft. Maybe they will. But you need to get wide receivers and offensive linemen. Whether you get 2 offensive linemen, how about that in the first round? Or how about 2 wide receivers? I'd go with either one of them. But then you have that top pick in the second round that they got, like Schlesinger last year. You have, maybe a little lower than that, or Judkins were 33 and 36 or something. So those top 3 picks, you got to get 2, I think, linemen and 1 wide receiver, or
vice versa.
1. Yep.
But it's also going to depend. I'm going to make a video. We're going to start this news show that I want you guys to all be ready for, because it sounds like it's going to be a great time. And I will say this, it's far too early to know exactly what the Cleveland Browns are going to do in the draft, because
free agency.
Yeah, they really attack that offensive line in free agency. Then maybe they take a wide receiver, and then maybe it's one of those top defensive players. And I know people will go crazy about that, but right now, should they just do nothing but take offensive linemen and wide receivers? Yes. Is that going to be the case in April? We're going to find out. All right. We have one more user submitted video, but we'll save that for a little bit. We'll kind of get that one at the end of the show, because I noticed in the background here, our special guest is here, and we're very excited for this. This got set up, and so big shout out to him for being very flexible, coming on with us kind of last minute. But over there for the Baltimore Ravens, he does a lot of film study. His Twitter handle is actually Film Study Ravens for the Ravens, and he really dives deep into all this, and I'm very excited to hear. Again, it's not that Todd Monken's an unfamiliar face, but just kind of his impressions on Monken coming to Cleveland. We're going to bring him in right now. It's Ken McKusick. Ken, welcome inside the Browns beat.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
We're doing great, Ken. How are you?
Life is good.
Ken, we made everybody promise that we're going to be nice to you tonight. We've got to have like a Baltimore-Cleveland truce here for a minute. And I made everybody in the comments promise that they were going to be nice to you here for just this one night, okay?
I'm on with Jake Burns of OBR all the time, and we some of the best discussions ever about football. Really appreciate you guys.
Oh, awesome. Go ahead, Fred.
I was just going to say, Ken, what we had Todd Monken here in 19 with Freddie Kitchens as the head coach, but Kitchens was calling the plays. Browns had a pretty good offense, but they were 6-10. The defense wasn't that great. Just kind of from a 30,000 feet level, we see obviously Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry's not bringing those guys with him. What can he do, or what do you think his strength is in putting together an offense that, can be watchable? We've watched the last 2 years where the Browns have averaged 15 a game and 16 a game. And that's obvious where the Browns ownership felt it was worth risking losing their defensive coordinator over this move to get somebody that can get them points on the board.
So Monken's very adaptable. I think that's one of the strengths he brings. There was some concern. The Ravens had an extremely tight end heavy offense when he came here with Greg Roman. Really the heaviest offense, I believe, in NFL history. There's not data available all the way back, but I can tell you in the last few decades, it's by far the heaviest in terms of relative to the average per play of tight ends plus fullbacks plus OL6. And the 22 offense in particular used 2.35 such players per plays. And you only get 5 eligible receivers. One of those is going to be a running back. And then you have 2.35 of these heavies. That only leaves 1.65 receivers, which is extremely low by current National Football League standards. So he came in, he changed that up. Ravens are still the heaviest team in football. They have Patrick Ricard still. They're still up at 1.85 on that same metric, but they've really adapted a lot more to more 11 personnel since he's got here. He'd used 2 tight ends at Georgia, including Darnell Washington, the Pittsburgh player.
Yep.
So they did a good job with that. And these are the stats that are just unbelievable. In 23 and 24, when Lamar had 2 MVP level seasons, throwing to the tight ends in those 2 years, 143.5 passer rating, 30 touchdowns, and 1 interception.
Wow.
Okay. That dropped off in 25 to 91.3, which was below his overall passer rating of 103.8. So the tight end drop-off was a big part of the offensive drop-off. And a lot of that, frankly, was also Lamar-based. And a lot of the criticism that came on Monken in this last season was Lamar-based, is that his injuries killed the misdirection that the Ravens offense is the fuel of the Ravens offense. And so they were much worse off. They weren't as successful running the football, even though they still ran for 5-point-something yards per carry. It wasn't 5.8 or 5.9 again. Jackson himself had a terrible record of FNTP, I call it, forced not to pass throws. That's combining his sacks and scrambles into a single thing. He was negative for the first time in his career, negative 0.3. He'd been as high as plus 5.6 yards per play in 2019. So anyway, Monken had a tough situation to work with Lamar's injury this year. That was probably the hardest thing he had to overcome.
I've got just so many different areas as somebody that's really, dive so deep into the Ravens. But, one thing, we're an AFC North city. We're Cleveland. We like to run the football. And I think sometimes you look at the numbers, and I said this at the top of our show, and, I think you look at like EPA and all that, and the Ravens are number one in rushing, but I think it's a little bit slanted when it's Baltimore because not every team's going to have Lamar Jackson out there that can take off and run the ball. But I will say, and I want to, I want to know what your thoughts are on what Todd Monken, how he had an effect on this. When Derrick Henry went to Baltimore, I'm not going to lie to you, I was kind of excited because I don't want the Ravens to be good. Sorry, just as a rival.
Understood.
And Tennessee, you ran him into the ground, and I thought there's no way this guy is going to go to Baltimore and have this bounce back, because it looked, by the time he was leaving Tennessee, it looked like he was about on his last legs. And all of a sudden he has this resurgence and this revival, and he's back to just being Derrick Henry. And I think the way they use him is just so smart all the time. So what do you think the hand is that Todd Monken had there? And what should Browns fans then feel about what he can maybe do for this running game that has been, ever since Nick Chubb's injury years ago, has been really tough for them to get anything going on the ground?
Right. So the thing that has worked for the Ravens all the way through the Jackson era is that Jackson has improved the success rate for every single running back he's ever played with. And Derrick Henry, for example, had a 49.3% career success rate with Tennessee, 58.8% in his first year in Baltimore. It dropped off to, I want to say between 51 and 53% this last year. It wasn't nearly, it was 53.1. That's what it was. So he's off about 5 points. Closer to 6, in fact, this last year. But success rate, for those Browns fans, I know a lot of you guys are extremely knowledgeable fans, so I'm really nod of the head. I always look at your boards, and I'm always very impressed with what you guys know. But success rate is the percentage of plays on which you keep up with the sticks. It's the old Football Outsiders measurement. So it's very closely tied to drive success rate, which is percentage of first downs that you turn into a first down or touchdown after that. That's been the hallmark of the Lamar offenses until this year. And this year they were terrible with that. So that's the thing they need to get back. Monken inherited that run game. What I really give him credit for is that he didn't completely change it. And that's why I think he's very adaptable. Is, he hadn't been a big running coach in the past. And I think, he'll, whatever you're good at on offense, he'll try and magnify that and minimize your weaknesses. And I think he's quite good at that.
We don't know about all the inner workings, but we know John Harbaugh felt good enough to want him to go to the Giants with him. You mentioned adaptable. I don't know if you can put a pulse or what you think that he would bring the optimism that the Browns offense will be able to start turning things around here.
He'll bring lots of optimism and lots of kind of his talk is very accountable in terms of what he does. He has an interesting stance. So you guys attend camp and go to the podium occasionally and see the guys speak. I'm sure Monken has a way of just, I don't give a crap about you media people. He takes his play card from practice and he sticks it in the front of his pants. And he's doing his interview with his play card in his pants like this. It's a really comical thing. And you ask him questions. He's very direct in terms of his responses. He's not a guy who's trying to hide things. He's not a coach speak guy. So I think you'll appreciate that about him. I wonder, how he's going to be with injuries. Now that's his responsibility. Baltimore, no coach talks about injuries except for Harbaugh. And Harbaugh, frankly, he gives away too much information, but he tries to give away less, which means he ends up being one-sided about telling you when a player is going to play, and then he has no comment when he's not going to play, which means no comment means he's not going to play. So it's a bad situation to get yourself into. Anyway, I don't know how Monken's going to be with injury talk like that, but I'll be interested to watch some times up there. Very good interview though, and you guys will appreciate how he answers questions. Very much accountability. Talked about certain players and need to be getting to scheme the football more. And in the Ravens offense, that's Rashad Bateman. Was a guy as it didn't get a lot of targets before Monken showed up, and it was somebody he needed to get more involved in the offense. He goes, some of it's scheme. We can have some quick out plays. We can have the ball out of his hands quick, and the rest of it is just like any sport. You're playing basketball on the court. You want the ball. You want to take the key shot. Well, show that you make the key shot. Kind of thing. Really pushing that accountability back on the player. So I like that, and I think you guys will too in terms of how his stance is on things.
Ken, on the offensive side of things here in Cleveland, we had this influx of young talent last year, and obviously a quarterback question still exists and will exist until they get it figured out. But there's this influx of young talent, a lot of rookies. They played more rookie minutes than any team in the NFL by like a mile. Just talking about development and maybe what you saw, there were some guys by the time Todd Monken got there to Baltimore, he had plenty of established guys, right? He didn't need to really develop Lamar outside of the fact that you always should be developing. He didn't have to really develop Mark Andrews, that's like, they didn't have all that. But for maybe some of the younger guys that came in on that offense, just talk about what you saw as far as growth and development and just the guidance of Todd Monken through that process.
I think it leaves a lot of that to the positional coaches. I would say, they had an offensive line coach for, Joe D for many years, who was fantastic. And he unfortunately passed away before the 24 season. But they've had a lot of really good positional coaches in Baltimore that handle a lot of that development of the individual player. If you looked at the defensive side of the ball, there was been some things like moving Kyle Hamilton around that were very, avant-garde thoughts that were different about that. I wouldn't really say that Todd was responsible for too much. Big accountability guy. Last camp, I'd say the thing that is developmental in nature from a team perspective, but not from an individual perspective, is they spent a lot of time trying to work on what I call set and snap drills. And I bet that's a big part of what you see this next year. So they go to the line, no helmets. They run, they get the play call in, they run out of the huddle, get to the line as quickly as possible on the play clock. They run their motion. There's often a defensive coach on the in the defensive backfield who'll show different defensive scheme to them to kind of throw them off. But they're running complex cadences all of those times. So they're trying to learn how not to go on one all the time and let the defense basically get us starting blocks in terms of the pass rush. So when they do that, they had troubles early on. They were actually accumulating quite a number of false starts, both during regular 11-on-11s and in these drills. But by the time the regular season rolled around, it was great. I mean, they dropped from 24 to 19 false starts. And if you think about it, an increase in false starts probably would have been okay because they were going with much more complex cadences to try and fool the defense, draw some offsides themselves, but mostly just get either the defense to give away something to them between 1 and 3 in terms of maybe the slot corner moving in and showing blitz or, various things that you can read pre-snap and allow you still to make a check. That was all done extremely well. And it was a real question. We kept asking questions about it all summer long about, what's going on? What do you see with the false starts? He's very much stick to it with his message. Some of those interviews, by the way, they're out there on the Ravens press room site. They're worth going out there to look at just how bad the media was with him in terms of asking about that whole summer, pretty much.
You might not be your area, but we don't follow it, but we had heard there was a rift between Lamar and Monken or something, and don't even know if that dealt with Harbaugh departing Baltimore. Do you know anything about that or what that might have been about? Or was that just Lamar being unhappy, things not going his way?
Lamar's a competitor and, he really wants to win. I'm not sure I buy the notion that there was a really bad relationship. I definitely don't buy the notion that there's a bad relationship between Harbaugh and Lamar. And that was stated at times. I think there might have been kind of an ambivalence in the end, though, that if Lamar had said something, maybe that would have been the straw off the camel's back that let Harbaugh stay. And I think there might have been an ambivalence that he said, well, whatever you decide, Steve, you go ahead and make the call, meaning Steve Bisciotti is the owner. I think there might have been that. And reportedly, Harbaugh really wanted to keep Monken for the next time around. He wanted to run it back with Monken in 2026, which is strange because Harbaugh and Monken were like fighting like an old married couple at midseason about, what was happening over the headset and whatnot. And Monken is talking back to him. It's like at the podium separately from your head coach and saying, a lot of stuff comes through the headset and some of it's good and some of it's bad. And I've just got to go ahead and make my own call after that. It's like, it's like literally like an old married couple fighting with each other about their weaknesses in front of their friends. I thought that was interesting. And then, Harbaugh's loyalty to Monken, despite that, is tremendously high. So obviously there's a great deal of respect there. I know the Giants fans, I've been doing a lot of Giants shows these last few days for obvious reasons. The Giants fans are going to be very upset that they lost Monken.
Yeah, I've already started to see that online. Although it was a shocking day in Cleveland because this was the dark horse candidate, and then he's your head coach. And I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. But this is just more a little bit for fun. But there's been some names already floating out there, and we know we're getting into finally, for us at least on this end, and for you guys in Baltimore, you get past the head coach thing, and you can really start looking into the offseason. And there's some names, and you've got a couple names in Baltimore that I know people in Cleveland here are very interested in. Obviously, Monken already brings his offensive line coach with him in Warhop, who was here a long time ago.
Wait a minute, Monken brought Warhop. Did that happen today?
It did. It was
first hire.
It was like 10 minutes after they announced it.
Incredible. Okay, I've got. If you want to hear about that,
go for it. Talk to us.
I'll just say that I thought Warhop had already interviewed for the Giants offensive line guy, so I thought he would probably go with Harbaugh there. So that didn't happen. Ravens fans have been calling for Warhop to be out. I score every play on offensive line. So if you're that's kind of my specialty. Anyway, so Warhop has been a guy. He's not Joe D. He came in. He has some specific things he's pretty good at. He's good at reducing penalties for offensive linemen. That he did very well in the second half of both of these seasons. He's partially responsible for the good stuff about the being able to deal with the various set and snap formations that they did and get off at different cadences. But that's news to me, and that's very interesting that they would bring him. I think he was a step back from Joe D in terms of fundamentals. I think some of the footwork broke down on the Ravens offensive line this year, particularly on pulls. So it's all about the dance step on pulling, and primarily it's about the center and the opposing guard not getting stepped back off the snap and creating an obstacle for the moving the player in motion. And that had never been a problem with Joe D. Well, it was a big problem again, and it had been a problem before Joe D for the Ravens years ago. So it was that was something that I don't think went particularly well. They have non-athletic guards who had trouble pulling, but the great thing about Joe D is they had complete non-athletes, James Hurst, Bradley Bozeman, all these really mediocre athletes who they turned into very good and prolific pullers during their time at guard with the Ravens. So I think it's interesting that Warhop went with Monken just like that.
So that's on the coaching side of things. A lot of people are talking on the player side of things, and I will tell you the hottest name that fans have their eyeball on is Tyler Linderbaum. Because this offensive line needs help. The Browns center, Ethan Posich, A, his contract is up, and then B, right at the end of the year, he ruptured his Achilles. So that seemed to kind of end that. But then our conversations got me thinking there's a free agent tight end over there in Baltimore too, and the Browns have a free agent tight end in David Njoku. We don't know what's going to happen with him. But I believe Isaiah Likely, am I right? I think I'm right that Isaiah Likely is on the
all
market.
of them are free agents, so they became free agents at the same time.
And if we know Monken loves his tight ends, I wonder what the draw. I wonder if there'll be any guys. Do you think he had relationships good enough that any guys would be maybe apt to say, "Oh, I like playing for Todd Monken"?
I think it's about the money, and I think that he can have who he wants if it's close. So Linderbaum is the big question mark for the Ravens in terms of whether they re-sign him or not. I think what it'll come down to in Baltimore is whether or not they can get Lamar re-signed. Now, they can afford Linderbaum and make it fit either way, but they only really want to expend and potentially overpay, and I'll get to that in a second, if they know they're going to have Lamar there for the next 6 years instead of 2 years. So, and honestly, if they're only going to have him for 2 years, they probably only end up having him for 1 year and have to trade him. That's what probably will happen with Lamar Jackson if they can't get this contract done this offseason with a 3 or 4 year extension. So anyway, with Linderbaum, not a good pass blocker. He's right in the middle of the pack as a pass blocker. And if people are looking at PFF and using the combined score, I'm going to tell you, don't do it. Look at your separate run and pass blocking scores. They're pretty good about the scores. They're bad with their integer numbers for the hurries and pressures, but they're pretty good with the pass and run blocking individual scores. And Linderbaum's in the very middle of the pack, 18th out of 32 among pass blockers. You can't pay that guy the top of the market money, in my opinion. So while I'm willing to overpay, which would be basically pay him the Creed Humphrey contract, which is 18 million AAV. But I'm not willing to go above that. And I think there will be teams who are willing to do that. And that probably include the Giants and Browns. So either of those are likely to end up with him and I could easily be a bidding war between more teams than that.
Fred, I don't know if I kind of cut you off before, so go ahead, Fred.
No, I can't remember what I was talking about.
That's my fault. Sorry, Fred.
When you just look at this, is there things, from that you think that, again, we're kind of taking this like, are you kidding me? They hired Todd Monken. He's got a great resume. I'm not against it at all, but we're looking at the fallout on the other side, trying to say, is this, worth risking your defense? What is he going to bring? What kind of impact? Like when you look at quarterback, we have Deshaun Watson. Do you think that he would look at him as somebody he can work with? Or would he have said, hey, Shedeur Sanders is a guy I can work with? I don't know. With the room now, is he more looking for a mobile quarterback like he had with Lamar, or more of a pocket passer?
I mean, I think he can work honestly with either. I think it's very adaptable. Like I said, didn't do a lot of play action in Baltimore, but I think if he had a drop back play action quarterback, I think he could work with that. You gain some things from having a non-mobile quarterback in terms of booting that I think are like not generally recognized. The antenna is always up for the backside edge defender in terms of chasing a booting Lamar Jackson. And if it's a booting Joe Flacco, doesn't have the same kind of attention. And you get some nice 3-level opportunities on the plays on the right side usually. I don't think there's any particular type of quarterback that he has to have. I mean, I do see weaknesses in the hire in terms of it not being a dynasty hire. I'm sure a lot of Browns coaches saw that, just the way the Steelers coaches don't like the McCarthy hire.
Right.
That it's an older guy, and you're not getting the same chance to renew and have an 18-year guy.
So
it's like, yeah.
Go ahead, Fred. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying on the quarterback thing, do you think he'd be the type of guy that'll go in the room and say, I need this guy. This is because the perception here was Kevin Stefanski was the guru of quarterbacks, but we could never get him to, maybe he did behind closed doors, but every time we ask him about, go tell him, get me this guy, the perception was Watson was thrust on him. We know Mayfield was here when and you just feel like, okay, this is the one guy that should know what he really wants and tell him to go get the guy that he's looking for. I mean, I don't know, or is just happy whoever you got.
I mean, he's not walking into a strong coach system like Harbaugh is. Harbaugh is walking to a system where they're nominally equals, and they're complete equals in Baltimore. The GM side is very strong, but the head coach side has been very strong for a long time, and so there's a consensus building in the draft room. There is table pounding. There's always table pounding for players from individual coaches, and I would expect Monken might attempt some of that. But if you look back at Stefanski's tenure with the Browns, I mean, obviously the biggest failure is that he couldn't make Baker Mayfield into anything after Baker. Well, when Baker subsequently became a player after he left Cleveland. Is that fair? I mean,
I think Baker's a guy that when he's told he's washed up, that's when he's his best, because he threw Stefanski under the bus. I won't get into all that, but there was a reason they moved on from him. But he grew up, after the Browns threw him away, the Panthers threw him away, and the Rams threw him away. He kind of went back to that walk-on mentality he had at Oklahoma and became a Heisman Trophy. For whatever reason, that's what gets him going, in my opinion.
So, Ken, I got just one final question because almost shame on me for not asking this first. But again, as somebody who dives as deep into Ravens football as probably anybody, when you saw the news today, and I don't know what I think you kind of said your understanding was you probably thought, all right, Monken will wind up in New York with the Giants, with Harbaugh. When you saw the news break today, just tell us here in Cleveland, as somebody who is so in depth on the Ravens, tell us just your honest feelings on what you thought about the hire, what you thought about keeping Monken in the division, and just your feelings towards it.
So I like Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator. I like him a lot. I think, he's one of the few good ones the Ravens have ever had. You look at the Ravens defensive coordinators, they've been uniformly excellent, or is the weakest one of the group, but the others are uniformly excellent. In Monken's case, he's one of the only good offensive coordinators. Tim and Roman have been the only two good offensive coordinators they've had. Got Kubiak for one season. But otherwise, they had a bunch of one-year guys, and they all pretty much sucked. And it's hasn't, Monken was a godsend for the offensive coordinator role. In terms of him being a head coach, I'm shocked. I mean, I'm really shocked he was getting interviews anywhere this year. The Ravens obviously didn't have a good year offensively, not by their own standards anyway. And it's really surprising to me that Monken was the guy. It's the kind of hire inside the division. I'm pretty happy that both the Steelers and the Browns didn't find a long-term coaching solution that is going to turn the franchise around in that way. They didn't find the next Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh with these two hires that were made the last few days. So from that perspective, I'm not fearful of that hire from a Ravens fan's perspective.
All right, Ken, listen, we're going to let you get going as we get ready to wrap up our show, but that was awesome. Tons of great in-depth information about Monken and his schemes and what to look for, and we really appreciate you, again, on very last-minute notice, deciding to jump in and do this with us here on Inside the Browns Beat. Again, go follow Ken at Film Study Ravens if you want to just learn a little bit more and get a little more in-depth about one of our division rivals. But, Ken, very much appreciate you, and go have a great night.
Let me give you one other thing before I go, if you don't mind. Go to filmstudybaltimore.com as the website. In particular, if you guys end up winning the Tyler Linderbaum sweepstakes, you can see on a week-by-week basis how I've scored it, and you can go along and score along at home because it's transparent in terms of the deduction plays are all listed there on a weekly basis.
Yeah, heck yeah. Go check that out, especially if you want to know a little bit more about some of these people we might want to be poaching from the Baltimore Ravens. Ken, again, thank you so much for coming on. We'll talk to you down the line.
Take it easy, guys.
Thanks, Ken.
Big shout out once again to Ken McKusick from the Ravens Film Study, doing a lot of great stuff over there. And you can see why the people here at the OBR really like talking to Ken when it comes to Ravens stuff, because that is very OBR-like the way he talks about football. But a lot of great information there, Fred. I think especially just, I became a little bit more encouraged early in the conversation when he was talking about the offense and how he was talking about really the Ravens offense, how good it's been. With Monken and how he's been kind of innovative in changing things. And really he kind of blamed the Lamar injury on maybe some steps back this year. But interesting. What do you think about the last thing he said there, Fred, where he thinks as a Ravens fan, he's pretty happy with what happened in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, that these aren't necessarily dynasty hires?
Yeah, that was a good question by you. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, nobody knows. I remember when John Harbaugh was hired, or even Tomlin. These were no-name guys, and it's like they let them. You can't be 100% sure you're getting the next Sean McVay. I think the Browns have tried that many times.
Yes.
When they hired Stefanski, that was what was presented. I didn't know who Kevin Stefanski was. Most Browns fans didn't. And so, yeah. Monken, the question, similar to Schwartz, how come nobody else ever hired him, and same way with McCarthy in Pittsburgh. Oh, he's been sitting out. Nobody's been after him. So you kind of feel it's a short-term thing. But in the Browns' plan, 5, 6, 7 years is long-term in
Yeah,
what we've
right.
seen.
Well, the average
And
coaching span in the NFL is 3 to 4 years. So,
and if he could get a succession plan where he got it going and he brought along the next phenom offensive coordinator and they identified and promote him and not let him get out of town, I think that can work all the way around. But yeah, I mean, we all, as a fan, look at other and say, like McCarthy, well, I don't know what he's going to do there, and all the way around. So it's kind of what I expected others, because it's the Browns is the Browns. That's what we hear all the time. Now, if they could have worked a way to keep the defense, everything running, and maybe they will, but I think now the offensive coordinator, is going to be a big, see who he can draw. If he's going to get somebody that's looked at as a really strong offensive coordinator or an up and comer, that could change things as well. But it's going to come down to one thing, whether he wins or not. Marty Schottenheimer took over for struggling Sam Rutigliano in his last year. And then he became the full-time head coach in 85, 4 straight playoffs. They fired him basically because he couldn't stop Elway on a 99-yard, the drive.
right.
And thought Bud Carson, the steel curtain defense from the Steelers, would. And we all know how that went,
Right.
So if they're willing to, the defense, sacrifice it, putting it all in there that Monken's going to turn them into a high-flying offense, you sure hope it can work, because you don't want to have 2 rotten units and end up next year with the number 1 pick and starting all over with new coach and new general manager anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Listen, I do want to do this. We had one more viewer video submission. To be honest with you, I don't even remember what the topic was, but it may be something we've already covered. But just to say thank you to the people that got their videos in, I want to play it. And this will be the last thing before we decide to get out of here. But Fred, one more user video submission or viewer video submission from John.
Hey guys, serious question here. Is the Browns coaching situation some long-term master plan that we just don't understand yet? Or is it some year-to-year experiment that we just kind of buckle up and see what's going to happen on Sunday?
All right, so we already talked about that, and I'm sorry, I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but I'd still thanks to John for sending that in. But again, just to go back to this, Fred, I saw that a lot. I saw it a lot. We just heard McKusick talking about how this can only be so long-term. And, we saw it a lot. They were talking about these 30-year-old guys, and then all of a sudden it's 60-year-old Todd Monken. But, Fred, the Browns go into this going, we want Todd Monken to be a good coach, and if he's a good coach, we'll let him be a good coach here for as long as he can be a good coach here, right? Like that is they didn't go into this thinking Todd Monken's going to be a bridge coach or it's going to be a 1-year solution. I saw so many people saying that. So many people saying, is this just a bridge? That is not. They did not hire their head coach based on that. They're going to let Todd Monken be the coach if he's good for as long as he can be good.
Absolutely. There's coaches that keep winning and they keep getting renewed and stay there. Listen, I know in the NFL it's vogue to get that up and comer. I mean, he's 59, he's going to be 60 next week. Most people retirement 65. If he got 5 great years with the Browns, I mean, he could have a statue built for him, Yeah, right. So it's not, the age isn't the issue. It's turning things around and having a winning team, a winning culture. And you hope that he can keep the job, laid in, 10 years or longer down the road, as long as he's healthy. It's just, the matter is they've all tried the same thing, to solve the quarterback issue and get turned. We thought that was solved for a little bit, but then everything went amok and they're kind of back to square one. So it's a frustrating thing in the short term because you really don't know what the direction is. I said this last week. I think when Osinski and Shieldhouse were in the mix, if the Browns aren't really want the offensive mind up and coming and think that it's worth it, you said it might be a year too early. Hire them and go 2-15 and get your number one pick next year. Then you got a coach who figured out how to be a head coach in his first year, and he can go get the quarterback. It's going to take them much longer, but at least you have that. But either Shieldhouse turned them down or they decided they didn't want to go through that. So here's where they are.
Well, listen, here's where we officially are. Todd Monken is the head coach of the Cleveland Browns. And now the best part about this, Fred, whether you loved the hire or whether you thought the hire was not what you wanted, you're not happy. The best part about the whole situation is that it's over. And now it's time we can finally turn our attention to the offseason, free agency, the beginning of the league year in just over a month, really, the draft, all of those things, because you could bring in Vince Lombardi, but if you don't have a quarterback and you don't have the talent, he's not going to win games. So the coach is just a piece. Now it's time for Andrew Berry and the rest of the group to fill out this roster. They did tremendous work last year. But now it's time to figure it out going forward into this year. So, Fred, that's going to do it for us here on this week's edition of Inside the Browns Beat. But I want to remind you, big time shout out to those of you that sent in user videos or viewer videos today. Dan, Harry, Lauren, Derek, John, thank you all for sending in those videos. This is going to be a new thing for us. So I look at all you guys in the comments. You guys are great. Phil, Chris, Ty Sox, all you guys that come in and are with us basically every single week. Pay attention to the socials, and we want your videos as well. So when you see that we're looking for questions and for you to be a part of the show, please do not hesitate. Send those out here. We want you to be a part of the show. So big shout out to, again, those of you that sent in those videos, and also big shout out to Ken McKusick from Film Study Ravens. Go follow Ken for all good Ravens information. It's always good to have a little background information, and he gives you all the best in-depth of it. So big shout out to Ken. Thank you to him for coming on late notice, to talk about Todd Monken to the Browns. Our big thank you goes out to the OBR for hosting us. Get over to the OBR.com and make sure you hit subscribe everywhere over there. I got to give a special shout out to Garage Beers. Episode 299 is tonight. The reason I'm rushing off the show is that before that, we have got one of our episode 300 interviews that we're going to do here in about 15 minutes. And that's a big guest. It's a big old guest. So you want to be there. But tonight on episode 299, we've got Nick Wilson from 92.3 The Fan, which is just going to be entertaining. I brought him on to just be entertaining and talk about the Browns and Monken and all that. So Nick Wilson's going to come on and join us to talk about that, to talk about Jose Ramirez getting extended, the Cavs and the Jackets, all that is coming up on Garage Beer. So go get a beer, hang out for the next 53 minutes, and then come back at 9 o'clock for Garage Beers right here on the OBR streaming network. That's going to do it for us here on Inside the Browns Beat. Go follow the OBR on the socials. Go follow our socials at Browns Beat OBR. And for Fred Greetham, I am Michael Keefe saying thank you all for joining us. The biggest thank you goes to all of you. The comments were great again tonight. We appreciate you and all of your support, and we'll do this again next week. Until then, as always, go Browns.